I'm John Falchicchio, Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and on behalf of Mayor Bowser, welcome to the Recovery Weekly Check-In, weekly event that we host via DMPED, and we're really excited to be here today to talk about rent and utility assistance. Now, before we get into our topic of the day, I want to make sure that everybody knows that as of yesterday, all DC residents 16 and older are eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccination is completely free, and we want to make sure that everybody takes advantage of this opportunity to help us get through the pandemic. So if you go to vaccinate.dc.gov, that's where you can pre-register. When an appointment is available, you'll get an invitation from DC Health inviting you to make an appointment at one of the slots for the upcoming week. But first and foremost, what you have to do is you got to pre-register at vaccinate.dc.gov. So be sure to do that today and help us get through this pandemic together. With that, I want to transition into our topic at hand, which is rent and utility assistance. Also yesterday, Mayor Bowser announced that we have put together, through the support of the federal government, a $352 million resource for rent and utility assistance. So a lot of our agencies have been working and planning to get this program together and to make sure that it's available for our residents. But we'll talk about it today. We have a bit of a time crunch. So folks who are watching, we need your help to make sure that our residents apply for this assistance. That's why Mayor Bowser calls this program STAY DC. STAY stands for Stronger Together by Assisting You. Really, I've heard it throughout the pandemic that folks have seen a loss of income and they never before maybe applied for assistance or have had trouble navigating the array of programs that were in place before the pandemic or that were put in place because of it. And so now we have one website, one application where our residents can go and get the support they need to help themselves and their families. So we have a limited amount of money. I know that the number $352 million makes it seem like that is unlimited, but we know that there's going to be great demand for this, so we need to get our residents ready. So we've got a couple partners here today, both inside the government and our community partners as well, to talk to you about how you can apply and why it's important to do so now. And so Mayor Bowser likes to say that we keep working for our residents, and we do it with our partners on the council. And so with that, what I really wanted to say is that Mayor Bowser says that there is a council member who's the at-large council member for housing, and that is Anita Bonds. We're happy that she's with us here today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the work that she's been doing with her committee in order to get ready, or get residents ready for this assistance and for other housing opportunities. So with that, I'll go to Councilmember Anita Bonds.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to join you today. I want to talk a little bit about, very quickly as possible, about last March 2020, when the COVID-19 virus began reaching critical mass across the nation. I worked with my colleagues on the council to make decisive action in anticipation of the inevitable impact on our city. At the time, we could not fathom how long this epidemic would really last. And so what we did, we said we've got to hit the ground running and focus on the crises. And the challenges in housing were extraordinary. On March 17, 2020, we passed the COVID-19 Response Emergency Amendment Act. As chair of the Housing Committee, my focus on this measure was to make sure that the devastating economic impact of the virus would not threaten the ability of our friends and neighbors who live in secure and affordable housing. And to that end, I and other council members drafted various pieces of legislation to address the looming health crisis on the horizon before the city. The bills with language that prohibits housing providers from evicting residents and non-residential tenants throughout the term of the emergency plus 60 days was enacted. The measure prevented the charging of fees on late rent payments. It was included in the Response Emergency Amendment Act. My colleagues and I also supported provisions in this initial legislation that prohibited public utility shutoffs during the emergency. And what I'm trying to do is to give you a chronology of what we did and our rationale for why we did it. On March 5th, 2020, the Council passed the Coronavirus Omnibus Emergency Amendment Act. And this legislation did a number of things. One, prohibited landlords from filing evictions with the courts during the public health emergency. Required both residential and commercial landlords to establish a 12-month payment plan with their tenants who were facing financial hardship due to COVID-19, and required landlords to refund tenants fees collected for amenities made unavailable during the public health emergency, and required landlords to regularly clean the common areas of buildings to prevent the spread of the virus. A few weeks later, my office moved language requiring all rent increases to be reviewed by the rent administrator during the public health emergency, and for the housing provider to be informed if their actions were in fact illegal. And then on September 22nd, 2020, the Council passed additional tenant protections, including prohibiting the eviction proceedings for any reason during a public health emergency, prohibiting new eviction filings during the public health emergency plus 60 days, and prohibiting owners from serving notice to vacate during a public health emergency plus 60 days. And we clarified the prohibition of owners' intimidation or coercing the renter to move out by taking actions such as cutting services, harassment, or refusing to renew or extend a lease or rent agreement. Additionally, the Council unanimously approved my bill to place a one-year moratorium on issuing certificates of assurance. This is a little-known provision that guarantees landlords tax credits when rent control laws are expanded. The moratorium will likely save the district millions of taxpayer dollars and will allow the Council to enact critical rent stabilization measures. We also implemented a temporary moratorium on the use of voluntary agreements and rent control properties. These agreements have greatly contributed to a loss of affordable housing, particularly in recent years. And then in October 2020, we were still busy. The Council passed the Emergency Rental Assistance Reform Temporary Amendment Act of 2020, which I introduced with Chairman Mendelson. This legislation reforms the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP as we know it, to aid tenants in their recovery from the public health emergency and to reduce administrative barriers to emergency rental assistance programs for tenants in need. And then in December 2020, the Council approved several measures to enhance the rights of tenants, preserve affordable housing units, and prevent foreclosures on seniors behind on their reverse mortgages. The Rental Housing Source of Income Amendment Act of 2019 was established that housing vouchers or rental housing assistance is provided by the government shall be considered as the income of the tenant for the purpose of this minimum income qualifications for rental of a dwelling unit. And then the reverse mortgage insurance and tax payment program, as we know it, called REMIT, extended the District of Columbia's Housing Finance Agency program that for additional 12 months. This program saves many seniors' households from foreclosure since its inception, and the measure is even more critical during this pandemic. These and other programs and policies we put in place, and I've talked a while, and I hope we've got your ears are open just for a few more, because we at the council have been busy knowing how detrimental this pandemic has been to our community and to our rental community in particular. I want to call your attention to one law that I was able to get through, and that's the Eviction Moratorium Public Safety Exception Emergency Amendment, most recently passed. This gives landlords a tool for protecting persons on the property against actions where other tenants may threaten and commit offenses against others on the premises. And finally, I want to mention that during my recent service as a member of the Mayor's Rental Housing Market Strike Force, where I served with Polly Donaldson, who's here with us today, and Laura Zeilinger and a few others. It was a great opportunity for my committee to collaborate with housing professionals and leading advocate groups and the DC courts and stakeholders and nonprofits that are in the field every day. I'm very grateful to Mayor Bowser and her agencies and my council colleagues that also served with me and others that took part in these important dialogues and deliberations for their dedication. I appreciate very, very much. And as I close, let me just challenge the tenants as the deputy mayor has. It is so important that you take advantage of the Stay DC program. This is a program that will help you with, it has created a one-stop shop, so to speak. One-time application process, and it's very easy, and you want us to spend your money. I say your money because this is money that is given to us through the federal government, but you and I pay our federal taxes, so it's our money too. So let's spend it wisely, and let's get our rents paid, and let's begin to make our landlords whole. When the virus started in our community, we were faced with tremendous impact. We didn't have this money. We have the money now. So let's use this infusion to the benefit of our community. Let's make a big difference and do it now. And so I know many of you are going to celebrate it, but we're not out of the woods yet, because there are many others who will not take advantage of it unless we remind them again and again and again. And so it's very important that you do that. And then closing, I wanted to just add that we must get this relief to the people who need it the most to shore up our communities and keep our residents housed and to keep our housing providers whole. And so working together, as Mayor Bowser always says, we'll keep everyone safe and secure and in our homes. And so, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and the other members who are on this dais that are agencies that provide critical services to our community, and to Mr. Lambert, who is just an outstanding citizen and provider in our private sector. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, Councilmember, thank you for that. And given your deck and your presentation, you could see why the mayor proudly calls you the at-large member for housing. And so we're excited to have you here. Councilmember, we're going to have a couple other presentations, and then we're going to actually open up the phone lines, go to social media for questions. So if you're listening on the phone line, you could actually press 0 now. That'll allow our team members to get you into the queue for questions. And then if you are on social media or watching on TV and want to join the conversation via social media, you can put your comment or question in the chat on Facebook. Use the hashtag DCHope. That allows us to see it. On Twitter, you could do the same. Use the hashtag DCHope, and that will allow us to see your question, your comment, and come back to it at the end of the discussion after we hear from our panelists. So with that, I want to bring in our next two participants, and they are the ones who do all the hard work to make sure that this program actually does work and actually serves our residents well. So with that, I want to bring into the conversation Polly Donaldson, who's the Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, and Laura Zeilinger, who's the Director of Human Services, both of whom have worked to make sure that Stay DC is ready and going to serve our residents well. It also, they'll go through kind of the mechanics of how the program works. So we'll get right to them. And then remember, they're here to answer questions. So press 0 now or use the hashtag DCHope on social media. With that, I'll bring Polly into the conversation.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate it very much, and delighted to be here again to talk about the newest of our rent assistance programs. I'm Polly Donaldson, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Before we jump into the new Stronger Together Assisting You or Stay DC program, I want to remind folks where we've been, how we got here to this point, and where we're going next, and what funding sources are making this possible. So let me just review, if I could, on the next slide, that we are getting approximately $352 million from two sources in the federal budget. One is the appropriations that was passed, the emergency appropriations passed in December and signed by President Trump. And then the second is the American Rescue Plan, which was passed in March by the Congress and signed by President Biden. All told, we're getting $200 million from the December money, $152 million from the March money, but the real critical piece, that $200 million, and Laura will go into more details on this, needs to be, as Councilmember Bonds and Deputy Mayor Falchicchio have said, needs to be expended by 65% of it by September of 2021. So we're under a great deal of time pressure, time crunch, but we've got the funds and we can make it happen. One thing that we have been able to do and started to do from March of last year was to step up from any source we could find, starting with federal funds and also our local funds, to provide immediate rent assistance to those in need who were having trouble paying the rent. So we had programs that targeted residents in small buildings called the Tenant-Based Rent Assistance Program, $1.5 million there. We invested $20 million in the COVID Housing Assistance Program known as CHAP that I will talk more about in a moment. This new program also augments that funding. We had $11.5 million for the housing stabilization grants. Together with the Housing Finance Agency, DHCD implemented that program in December. That program is now closed, but it really provided a lifeline, I think, to housing providers to really enable them to make it through the end of 2020 and the beginning of 21 by at least receiving some of the rent assistance that they needed at this time. We also, through the Department of Human Services, did invest $14 million in the Emergency Rent Assistance Program known as ERAP. That is a standing program within the Department of Human Services. We had $27.7 million in emergency solutions grants funding from HUD. That's an ongoing program. We had $1 million for the DC Mortgage Assistance Program, or DC MAP. That is still open and available as well, and will soon be supplemented by the Home Ownership Assistance Fund that is part of the American Rescue Plan as well. And then finally, we had $16 million for the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program known as LIHEAP with the Department of Energy and Environment. And again, that program will be augmented by some of the DC Stay program funds. Now, if you had applied to the CHAP program, I want to speak to you directly about what's going to happen now to your application as a result of this new DC Stay program. You will fall into one of these three categories, and you've been contacted already by the Department of Housing and Community Development to inform you as to your next steps. But just if you're listening, I want you to be able to understand. If you are a tenant who applied and submitted supporting documentation, you have been assigned to a community-based organization like the Greater Washington Urban League, who we'll hear from in a moment, who will contact you to request additional information and to process your application. If you have applied but did not submit any supporting documentation, you will be asked to register on DMPED.gov, the new site that we're going to hear about in just a moment, and submit your supporting documentation to that place to complete your application and receive payment. And then finally, if you're a housing provider, you have been informed about how you can help your tenants apply for Stay DC, but also how you yourself can initiate an application on their behalf. So I want to make sure that all three of those categories that you know, and if there are any questions, please pose them. I'll be happy to answer them. Again, this is really such an exciting opportunity, and I know you're interested in hearing more details, and so it's now really my delight to turn it over to Director Laura Zeiliner with the Department of Human Services. Laura?
And thank you so much, Director Donaldson. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm thrilled to be here with you today on the second day since we've launched Stay DC. As been noted, Stay DC is such an important resource for our community. We know that many residents are struggling financially due to COVID-19. And that might look like you not being able to pay for your utilities, being behind on your rent, and for any of your housing costs, rent or utilities, this is a program that can help you, and we want to encourage you to take advantage of that. There is absolutely no reason to wait. So going to the next slide, who's eligible? So you're eligible based on your income, and if you need to, one, be a DC resident, and if your income is at 80% or lower of the area median income. The table that's up on the slide gives an outline of per household size what that income limit is, and it does help understand if you are eligible. You can provide tax documents to show your income, and you can also show that if you've lost income in the last 60 days since your last tax filing, you can also demonstrate what your income has been over the last 60 days in order to qualify. So DC residents who meet the income qualification who are eligible for Stay DC. And we are encouraging you to seek that help and not wait. What can we help you with? And going to the next slide, we can help you with up to 12 months of back rent. So if you owe rent arrears, if you owe rent to your housing provider, to your landlord, we can support with 12 months worth of back rent. We can also support going forward for 3 months if you're still going to need help in the interim. And so there is, you can apply now and we can support you with that rent as well as your utilities through one application. We're excited that the portal that you apply through can help you with the range of different housing supports that you might need. You don't have to go to different places to apply if you need help with your utilities and your rent and to all of the different types of utilities. So it is a single stop shop. And if you have in a roommate situation and one of the roommates needs help with rent to be good on their portion of the rent, you also don't have to have your own lease. You can be in shared housing as long as you can document or attest to that housing and it's verifiable. We will work with you to support you in that situation as well. So on the next slide, I want you to make sure that you know how to apply. And there is a website. It is stay.dc.gov. And if you go to that website, there's information about what documentation do you need, and you can start your application right there. I'm thrilled to say that we already have had more than 1,700 applications come in our first day and a half since we launched, which is fantastic. People are requesting both rent and utility assistance, and we are hard at work processing those applications. There's also a call center staff, so if you're having difficulty with your application, you can call us. Our call center is open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and that number is 833-4-STAY-DC. And through that number, you can reach somebody who can assist you. We have call center operators who can work with you in English and Spanish, but we will also use the language line for all other languages where someone may need language assistance. The application on the website is translated into multiple languages. We are working on some of the links, making sure those links work on translation, but if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the website under resources, you can see the application and the application assistance materials in several languages, particularly Spanish and Amharic, which are very prevalent in terms of district residents. So we will have some of those things in the website fixed very in the near term, but you can still go ahead and see the application and application support tools in other languages right now. But if you're having any difficulty with that, please do go ahead and just call our call center and we will assist you. We're so happy to have this important resource available to residents. We know that with our emergency rental assistance program, where people could only get help once in a 12-month period, and there was a much lower cap on assistance that someone could get, that people waited until they were at risk of eviction until they sought help. This is a very different program. It is funded where tenants can receive much more assistance than through ERAP, and you don't have to show that you have a writ or anything like that to apply, just that you're behind in your rent. So we look forward to supporting the many residents we know are struggling financially, and to really ease that stress that comes with knowing that you're behind on your rent and your bills. So we're here to assist you, and with that, I have the pleasure of introducing one of our partners. So I always say that government does nothing alone. We only do it in partnership with our community providers, with other organizations, with advocates, and of course with our residents. And there is no greater example than the Greater Washington Urban League. I'm pleased to turn the mic next to Mr. George H. Lambert Jr., who is the president of the Greater Washington Urban League. Greater Washington Urban League has been a tremendous partner to the Department of Human Services administering ERAP for many years, and is also taken on the task of administering the CHAP program for the district. We know that they've served over 1,400 customers recently through the app program in this recent year, and they also provide many essential wraparound services to people in addition to other financial assistance and just tremendous programming in our community. So with that, I'm pleased to turn it to Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Director Zallinger. I'm delighted to add my voice to the Stay DC partnership. I want to begin by saluting Councilmember Barnes, the mayor, and the members of council for casting a wide safety net, putting guardrails in place, protecting DC residents from collateral damage, and positioning our city for post-COVID-19 economic recovery. Can you imagine a world with no equity gaps? That is the overarching vision of the Greater Washington Urban League. All of our work is directed at closing and eliminating equity gaps. Not only are we a trusted voice, but we are also a counselor, protector, and friend for DC residents turning to the doorstep for the Greater Washington Urban League for help. The devastating and disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the African American community has been a tipping point. But the good news is stay DC. I'm going to say that again. The good news is stay DC. Few could have weathered this storm without the resources provided through Stay DC. To the customers turning to our doorsteps for help, know that there is a pathway forward. Our goal at the Greater Washington Urban League is to move those we serve from situational improvement to life transformation. Stay DC is one of the tools, I should say, in our toolkit to actually make that happen. Let me end on this. A great statesman once remarked, the true test of any government is how that government treats its citizens in the dawn of life, meaning its youth, how that government treats its citizens in the twilight of life, meaning its elderly, but most important, how that government treats its citizens in the shadows of life. And in the context of this conversation, all of us have been impacted by the shadows of life of COVID-19. The Greater Washington Urban League is delighted to partner with the District of Columbia agencies, putting citizens at the center of proactive measures protecting DC residents from collateral damage. So I want to end by saying, Thank you, Director Donaldson. Thank you, Director Zallinger. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you again, Councilmember Bonds. And now, let's continue our work and see this mission through. I also want to take an opportunity to introduce one of the recipients of the Stay DC and CHAP program, and her name is Jennifer Gray. Ms. Gray happens to be a resident of Ward 7. Unfortunately, lost her job and came to us seeking assistance, and I'm delighted we were certainly able to support and help her. So, Ms. Gray, delighted to turn the spotlight on you at this point, and please take this opportunity to share your story and whatever information you'd like to have our audience to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jennifer Gray, as it was just stated. I recently lost my job because of COVID-19. I was employed at a patent and trademark law firm for 6 years, but due to COVID, I was laid off. And because of such a loss, I was not able to recover in terms of being able to pay my rent. So I got behind. And once I talked to someone at the rental office where I live, they were able to introduce me to such a program. And through this program, I've been able to get caught up on my rent, so I don't have to worry about the added stress of not being able to pay months of back rent. I just found out that I was actually awarded today, which is really a blessing for me. As of April 10th, I am a resident of Naylor Gardens for 11 years. So it's wonderful to be able to continue to live here without the extra stress of not being able to pay rent, wondering if I'm going to be able to pay a large amount of back rent. So I'm really grateful to the program, and I'm thankful to be able to continue to be a resident here at Naylor Gardens. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing your story. We want to make sure that we hear other stories like yours. We have a lot of questions coming in on social media about the program and about other elements of housing. So why don't we get to those questions? And Jennifer, I hope you'll stick with us as we go through this as well. So with that, I want to go to the first question, which came in via Facebook, and it was Allison who asked about translation. So right now, the application and the translation for the application itself, specifically, she asked about Spanish and Amharic. So I'll go to Director Zallinger to give us an update on that.
Okay, yes, thank you. So Allison, if the other way that you can get to the translated, not just the Google widget, but the translated application is by going on the homepage for stay.dc.gov and scrolling all the way down to where it says resources. And there are places where you can click for program FAQs, tenant application user guide, as well as for the application itself in Spanish, Amharic, French, Korean, Cantonese, and Vietnamese. And that's where you can find all of those resources. You can have the first page translated by clicking select language in the upper right, but if there are issues with the additional pages, the links to those translated resources you can get through the bottom of the page. And so that is the way that you can see those translated documents.
And so this is the magic of live TV. So that is for the application itself at the bottom of the page?
There are 4 documents there at the bottom of the page. One is the program FAQs. There's a application user guide, so to walk you through what each of the things mean. A housing and utility provider application user guide, as well as the paper application where you can download and fill that out.
Okay. And then we are working on the application itself to have the application itself be in the different languages, correct?
So it's in those languages right there, but to be able to do it electronically in those languages, there's just an issue with something on the website that will be fixed imminently.
Okay, great. So next question is from Twitter. So it was, I just have the handle, DC STEM, and they asked about rental assistance for nonprofits So Polly, I think this is some of the work that you've done with CDBG dollars maybe, or other resource, so nonprofits that need rental assistance for the organization.
Right. We did do a series of nonprofit assistance capacity grants of up to $50,000. We were able to use some CDBG funds for that. The rent assistance in Stay DC is actually directed towards tenants and residential, not commercial or one's organizational rent. And so there are limits based on what's in the federal legislation and the guidance from the Treasury Department. However, we will strive to find some additional resources either through some of our small business assistance programs to potentially help other nonprofits that need assistance.
Great. And a couple of questions. I think these are for Councilmember Bonds. Councilmember, you had mentioned in your remarks about provisions in the law to require landlords to clean common areas. Can you talk a little bit about that? We got a question from Deborah on Facebook about that.
Yes, thank you very much for that question, because it's so important that landlords keep the common areas clean. Usually, we have heard reports where it's clean twice a day, and that is considered suffice, provided that people are not using the common area. But when people are using the common area on a regular basis, it requires more cleaning. But there is a requirement that landlords, housing providers, make sure that this process takes place. Some landlords have gone the extra mile to actually hand out masks and to make sure that other cleaning products are available to particularly their senior residents. And so if you're having a problem with that, would you please give us a call so that we can do our checkup on that? I can give you my office number, and of course you have the mayor's number, I'm sure, but my office number is 202-724-8064. And call it anytime, and we will endeavor to address your issue.
Fantastic. And then Denise on Facebook asked about rent increases and any prohibitions for 2021. Is that something that the council has under consideration?
The council really is hoping that we can hold the rent. At least our committee, the housing committee, is hoping we can hold the rents at the current level for through the end of this calendar year. As you know, once the health emergency ends, things change, and our legislation, our emergency legislation, also is no longer in effect. Except for the provisions that extended for 30 days or 60 days, whatever the measure may be. And so things pretty much returned to normal once our health emergency ends. And I believe that ends on the 20th of May, yes. I believe, 20th of May. So it's coming up very soon. So if you traditionally get a rent increase in, let's say, June, you can expect that if we are not still under the health emergency, that you will maybe get an increase. If you are in rent control, listen, that's a good thing, because now it's CPI plus 2, and I believe CPI is like 1.3. So it would be around 3% increase. If you're in market rate, well, we don't have a say in that as of yet, but we're working on it. So thank you.
Well, and Councilmember, for Denise, who wrote that question on Facebook, I think really the reason why we're gathered here today is to make sure that you know that this resource is available. So Councilmember Bonds, I don't have a crystal ball, but what we do have today is we have this resource. So by going to stay.dc.gov, it actually is going to help you to make up for any rent that you owe from the last 12 months. and actually help you with your rent for the next 3. So Denise, I want you to hone in on what we're talking about today, because it's so important that you not just think about kind of that I know it's hard because that rent increase may be coming. It's something that you're thinking about. But right now, today, what we can do is we can help you with rent that's due, that was due over the last 12 months, and we can help you with the next 3 months of rent. So that's why we really are pleading with our residents to go to stay.dc.gov and really apply today and get the application rolling. So with that, I want to go to our caller who's on the line, which is Richard in Ward 6. So I'm going to see if the team can open up the line for Richard. Richard, I think you're...
Hi, yes.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is Richard. I'm in Ward 6, and I thank you for this calling information. I was doing exactly what most of you all were saying on this line. I am behind on my rent. I lost my job in December, and so I've been behind rent ever since then. And so I put in my application, and I'm just still waiting to hear back. I wanted to know what our residents are supposed to do kind of in the interim, and how do we know if our application is still, moving forward? Are there any delays? And how long should we expect, a reasonable reply?
If you applied thank you for that question. If you applied under the CHAP program and did submit documentation, your application is being processed at one of our community-based organizations that's helping us to implement CHAP, including the Greater Washington Urban League, Housing Counseling Services, and the United Planning Organization. And so I will say that I do have, and I think this is a question that comes up later, that were 600 CHAP applications that did not submit any documentation yet, and they have been asked to put their information into the Stay DC application. And so that will help move those along as well. If you're in the CHAP queue right now, your application will be processed, and we will be able to, if you meet the eligibility, we'll be able to process that payment. So I do ask, we do have about 2,000 applications in the CHAP queue right now, and so yes, it is going to take a little bit of time to process, but we will be processing all of those applications.
Great. And is Richard still with us? Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Richard, now did you get any confirmation that your application was submitted? And Polly, should he get some kind of notification? So Richard,
Sure.
I guess to start with you, did you get any indication that your application was completed?
Yes, I did receive an email in March, and then I'm looking for the exact day. Then I did a follow-up email April 6th, and then they said that I was assigned to the Housing Counseling Services, HCS, on March 6th, and then I still haven't heard anything as of today. So I've been kind of checking in weekly
Sure.
to see, to make sure I haven't missed an email or something. I have checked my spam, as it says in the email, but I haven't seen anything.
And they are working towards, through the applications that they've received in the order that they've been received. So I do expect that they will be, and Housing Counseling Services has been a longtime provider of assistance to residents of the district, and you will be hearing from them.
Great. So Richard, thank you for calling in. Thank you for sharing that. Another question actually about CHAP as well, Director. This is Magnolia, who wrote in on Facebook that there's lots of barriers preventing individuals to apply for CHAP, too much in the application, some clarity and guidance needed on how to approach the application for CHAP.
Sure, and that's precisely what the community-based organization Housing Counselors can help you with, and they will help you with that with your application. A lot of the requirements in the application were mandated by the funding source. Originally for CHAP, it was the CDBG program, which has some very clear guidelines and regulations that we had to adhere to, and now we will be using the ERA funds that are funding Stay DC, and there will be those requirements, particularly for information on the COVID impact on the tenant and on what your financial need is that you've not been able to pay your rent. That has to be documented. That's per the federal legislation.
All right, and a similar question actually from Amanda. I'm going to ask Laura to help us with this one. So why does the portal, why doesn't, excuse me, the portal make it clear that you can self-attest to financial hardship? That was Amanda's question.
So if you scroll down, it does show that there's an attestation, but there's similar to Director Donaldson's answer, there's a requirement that we first try to obtain the actual documentation, and if that's a barrier and the person can't provide it, then we will accept an attestation, but it has to be secondary after we've tried to obtain the documents, the evidences to show. So it's part of just making sure that we are responsibly able to document how we're distributing the money, that the people we're distributing it to are eligible, and we're following the federal guidelines in doing so. We don't want to see any of the funds recaptured, and so those are the policies and procedures that we will follow. But there is on the application, it's not the first thing you see, but it does show that what we will accept if you need to substitute something that you are unable to access.
And I wonder too, for like Mr. Lambert, this is a federal resource, and so we have guidelines from the federal government on what we have to obtain from the applicant. What do you suggest to folks as they kind of think about applying for this? And really, what we want to do is let people know that we're going to figure out what we need in order to stay in compliance with the federal government, but we do need help from you. So how do you coach people into getting ready to apply for a program like Stay DC?
So first of all, let me say that, we have a very dedicated and hardworking team at the Greater Washington Urban League, so I do want to take a moment to certainly acknowledge them. But I would say to you, just prepare as you would prepare for any critical kind of documentation if you're applying to go through a process. Our counselors and workers are there to really help you to navigate through that application. And so if you get to us, we will help you to do that, whatever questions you may have, whatever additional documentation you may need, we're certainly more than delighted to help you to get there. You heard Director Donaldson say that, there's lots of money available. Quite frankly, we want to double down in terms of just making sure that you have an opportunity to have access to those dollars and get those dollars to you as quickly as possible. So again, please reach out to us. We will help you to navigate through any questions that you have on an application.
Great. And I want to ask Jennifer too, first off, Jennifer, before you start, that throw that's behind you on your couch reminds me of one that I had when I was growing up. And when you first started speaking, I was like, did Jennifer has the same throw that I had growing up. But so it just reminded me of growing up in Jersey City. But Jennifer, tell me how did you approach getting ready to apply for the assistance, and what was it like in terms of what you needed to provide in order to apply for it?
So when I initially applied, the website actually has the initial, set up to see if you're eligible. So all the documentation they asked for, I pretty much already had. So I had everything kind of already saved on my desktop. And so when I was given a counselor, if you will, once I was able to get in contact with her, and she had whatever initial documents or additional documents that she needed, the process just kind of flowed. So on the application, it'll ask you everything about your ID, social card, all those things. I was able to have that information readily available. And so the process just kind of flowed. Once you have all of your documentation, you'll pretty much be good to go.
And so Laura, from Jennifer's experience, what can folks do like to get their documentation ready? And if they don't have it all, should they start the application? What's our advice on that as well?
So you actually can go ahead and start an application, open account in the portal. And if, for example, you're putting your information in, it will also ping your landlord to verify and submit their documentation, so that you can go ahead and start putting your application while you're also gathering your documents, there is a fact sheet also on the website that shows all of the documents that you can use to provide in order to apply, and also where, if an attestation is accepted.
Okay. And I love this question from Emily. She asks, this is on Facebook, and she asks, what if housing providers don't want to participate in Stay DC or in complying with the application? Well, I think if they don't want to participate, they're going to get a call from Councilmember Bonds, first and foremost, then probably myself, then probably Mayor Bowser. But listen, this is, and I,
They actually have rights too.
yeah, no, I'm going to go to you. But
Okay.
joking, I was going to go to you in a second. Joking aside, the one thing I'd say is let's. I know there's a lot of what ifs about this program, and there are generally when we roll out a new program, and definitely understandable. But what we want to do is this is really a once in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime resource that we have from the federal government. So what we want to do is make sure that people start that application. So go to stay.dc.gov, start that application. We also have a hotline, 1-833-4-STAY-DC, in order to make sure we can answer a question live. But I want to go to Laura to tell us, too, what happens if that what if comes to fruition.
Sure. So here, an important what if is if a landlord or your property management company is not responsive. So tenant starts application, we start paying the landlord to verify the tenancy, submit their documents. If we will make 3 attempts to obtain that document on behalf of the tenant. If the landlord still does not respond, we will pay the money to the tenant so that they can make good on their rent and protect their tenancy. So that is in the federal rules. We will do that. And that's unlike ERAP, where we are really just paying rent arrears to landlords. Because we have ERAP, though, in our community, our housing providers are used to receiving additional rent assistance funds and that benefit. We don't, and we think for housing providers, we are going to want to preserve those tenancies, but we do have recourse. And I'll say landlords can submit as well on behalf of their tenants, and we will contact the tenant to ask them to verify and submit documents needed. And tenants might have questions for us that they don't want to ask their landlord. They can also call that number too. And they may not understand that if they get help now and they still need help later, what will happen? Will they still be able to get that help? So there are understandably going to be a lot of questions, and we're here to answer them. As the Deputy Mayor said, this is a resource that is unlike any that we've had available. We can really assist a lot of people who need help, and that's also going to depend, though, on people applying early, which is why that we have that emphasis. Because if we are not spending the money down, it will be recaptured and given to another state that is spending faster than us. We know our residents need this, and so we will actually be able to help more people with more money if people start applying sooner. So there is no reason to wait.
I've got another what if. I know I just talked about what ifs, but a what if. So what if you get evicted or forced to move before you get response on Stay DC?
Well, and maybe council member will want to answer this as well, but the eviction moratorium is in place. You cannot be evicted at this time.
Yeah.
And the resources that are being made available, or we're very conscious of the fact that this is particularly to ensure that you can stay housed. That's what stay is about, safeguarding that. Council member, do you want to add to that?
I'd just like to add the fact that the eviction moratorium will be in place for 60 days following the end of the health emergency. So we are now talking July 20th. And so if any action is taken prior to that, you please let us know immediately so that we can get busy on that, that matter, for sure.
And there was an interesting article in the Washington Post just this weekend about eviction moratoriums. I know they get challenged in court. The federal government has an eviction moratorium, which is in place until June 30th. That's by CDC and by HUD. And so we know that's an important tool to give our residents stability. But we also know that with court challenges pending, that they can be something that might go away. And I don't say that to scare folks, but I think we all have to really think about where we are in the pandemic. And we've also got this program, I know it was just launched yesterday, but stay.dc.gov is where you can actually make sure that your rent that you have in arrears for the last 12 months gets paid. And that we even help you with your forward rent for the next 3 months. Now, we've been talking a lot and using the word rent, but we also have utility assistance on the same application. So I don't know, Mr. Lambert, if you've seen a program as powerful as this one before, because your utilities, think of your Pepco bill, think of your DC water, your Washington gas, any of those bills that you have, if you've got a balance that's due and you can't cover it, then you should be going to stay.dc.gov today. So Mr. Lambert, tell us about what this program means at this time.
Well, it's a program absolutely that's having a tremendous impact in terms of supporting many District of Columbia residents as well. You know, we have been a partner with Pepco and many of the other utilities in the city for a long time now. So we are well versed in terms of certainly helping folks, again, to navigate through that process, to put in place payment workout agreements, I would add, as well. So again, please reach out to us. You know, a while back we coined the phrase, don't suffer in silence. And I would say that, you know, that campaign is quite frankly very much apropos now. Do not suffer in silence. The resources are available. We want to help you to address whatever issues, concerns you have. So please, again, reach out to us. We're there to help.
Great. And we've got another caller, Jackie in Ward 8. We're going to see if we get Jackie. Your line should be open now.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm a realtor here in Ward 8, and I work with some small landlords. They have had some problems in the fact that although they have encouraged their tenants to apply for the programs, they have not. So the last program where owners were allowed to apply, they did, and they received the 80% for each tenant from April 1st through November 30th. Will this program allow landlords to go ahead and apply on behalf of their tenants? And that's basically my question.
Yes, so Jackie, thanks for asking that. Yes, landlords can apply on behalf of their tenant. Tenants will be asked to confirm the information, and they will need to show some information, but landlords absolutely can apply on behalf of their tenants. The other thing is that I think our partners at DHCD and our other housing provider, housing counselors and community organizations can also help bring the information out and support. So if landlords want to do an event where they are supporting their tenants to seek that assistance, we can figure out some ways to partner and be sure that we're making that application process as simple as possible. So we will be provide as much assistance as people need to support through that process. But yes, landlords can apply, and we will reach out to tenants to support them on their end.
And I know we're at time, but I want to keep going if it's okay with everybody that's joined us. I see Councilmember Bonds is giving me the keep going sign. So we'll jump in. Timothy from Ward 8 has a question as well. Can you hear us, Timothy?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. And what's your question or comment?
My question was, my fiance and I have been living here in Ward 8 for about 4 or 5 years. But when she initially got the apartment, she was the only one on the lease, and I didn't come onto the lease until about 2 years later. And my question was, how does that, if it does, affect our application process?
I think Director Zongler is going to.
So we would.
Thank you, Timothy.
So we would look at the household. So we would look at both tenants, the household income. So you and your fiance would be considered a household, and we would support you through that application process to see if you qualify based on both of your tenancy.
Timothy, thanks for the question. I know it's a question that a lot of folks have because a lot of folks could be in a household where they're not necessarily on the lease, but I know the application actually contemplates that.
It
So,
does.
Laura, can you talk to us about what folks need to provide and how they can apply even if they're not on that lease?
So even if you're not on the lease, you might have you might be subleasing, or you may be in a roommate situation. We can support you through that, but you can, you will need to show that you're in a place that does have a valid lease, and even if your name is not on it, we can still, through having the lease and the person's information, proving anything that proves that they actually live there, we'll be able to work through the application process. So it does not require that an individual's name is on the lease in order for them to get assistance, but we will, of course, need to do some work to verify that the person is an eligible tenant at that address.
Great. Timothy, thanks for calling in, sharing your story, and raising that question. Another question from Facebook, from Dion, who asks, how long will Stay DC take to be dispersed? And I think that's, so if you apply, let's take it that way. If you were to apply, how long does it take for that verification and then for disbursement as well?
So we're processing applications right now as they come in, and we will work to process them as quickly as possible without backlog once applications are complete. And we will be dispersing funds on an ongoing basis, probably bundling them weekly. So you should see within a week of your valid, complete application that that payment has been made on your behalf to either your utility provider or your landlord. And then the program will be, part of it will be depend on how quickly we spend down the funding in terms of the program as a whole, how long we have it, and it will also depend on the federal government. But right now, I think it's through 2023 that we, with the second tranche of federal funds that we haven't to spend the full amount. But again, unclear. It will likely depend on how quickly we spend down that first allocation, how much money we will have beyond that.
Well, and that's what's so important about getting folks to apply, to start that application today. Even if you don't have all that documentation, start the application so we know how many people are out there who need the assistance. If we announced today that the Powerball was $352 million and you had an opportunity to get a portion of that just by applying if you're eligible, then we would have folks rush to it. We need folks to rush to it with the same zeal, because we know that we can actually today, as we sit here, if you're eligible, we can pay for your past rent over the last 12 months, past due rent, and looking forward at 3 months. We can also do the same for your utility bills. So if you got a Pepco bill, DC water bill, or Washington Gas, you just have to put that information into the portal, and then we'll be able to cover that for you. So really for us, and I know folks are concerned about whether we will be able to use all the resource, whether we'll lose any of it. Well, we won't if everybody applies today. And that's what we really need people to do. So I'm going to go around for some parting thoughts from each of our panelists. I'm going to start with Jennifer. And Jennifer, just as you hear this discussion today and you think about your experience, what's your best advice to somebody who's listening about why they should apply for assistance?
Well, one, I mean, as I stated before, this program has been extremely beneficial to me. It's been a great help in terms of being able to cover back rent, which I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to be able to do that, considering my current state of unemployment. You want to gather all of the information necessary on the application as quickly as possible. That will get the process moving much quicker. So all the documentation that is needed, your social, your ID, all of that information, once you gather that, it'll keep the process moving quickly. But yeah, I'm absolutely grateful, and I thank you all again.
Well, Jennifer, thank you. Really appreciate you sharing your story again. It's powerful to hear it from you, and also to know that it gives you that peace of mind. So we're excited that we have programs that help our residents with that, but we're going to keep working to make sure that more residents understand that as well. So with that, I want to ask Mr. Lambert, too, to share his parting thought as well.
Well, again, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Imagine up to 12 months of your rent paid, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I go back to my earlier comments that I made, and that was the analogy that I gave you, the litmus test for a government that's really making a difference in the lives of the community that we serve. The Greater Washington League, we are very delighted to have a partnership with the District of Columbia government and all these agencies represented here. Very committed to making a difference, improving the quality of life, and also trying to really making sure to ensure that many residents who are suffering from what happened with COVID-19, you're not collateral damage, okay? You are not collateral damage. This effort is being very intentional about ensuring the economic recovery of our city and also the residents living in our city as well. So I'll end on that note.
Fantastic. Councilmember Bonds?
Yes, I want to challenge everyone who is listening to insist that the council and all other organizations such as our ANCs get this information out as quickly as possible. It is critical. I continue to sit here and think about $352 million and how do we really get it out, and understanding how long it took to just get 11 million out, and we still have maybe 2 million left over. So I am asking you, please, as you talk to your commissioners, as you talk to your civic associations, all of those groups that are having Zoom meetings, and I'm going to talk to my colleagues and insist that we have a session with the different organizations in the various wards, because this money will go unspent if we don't push to get it spent. And of course, we have guidelines that we must follow, and let's follow those guidelines and move forward as a community for the good of the entire community.
Thank you, Council Member. I just want to say, Deputy Mayor, as of closing here, that one of the things that we did not talk about as extensively is the communications and outreach plan that we've developed with your office and with DHCD, with DHS, to be able to reach. And so there'll be, you'll see in the print media, you'll see it in social media, you'll see it in free media coverage of what is available and being able to really get that message out to the communities. We're also going to be doing some good street outreach, you know, door to door, and really working to engage neighborhoods, communities, associations. So stay tuned. It should be starting this week, and we will really be able to maximize that.
And my parting words are just, I am the advantage of the Director of Human Services and also operating all of our programs in the homeless services continuum in partnership with the organizations in our community. And we know that when people can't pay rent, we see them at the front door of the homeless system, where they often, that upheaval is traumatic. It's traumatic for families, it's traumatic for individuals. And so we're at this very unusual juncture in time where we know many people are suffering and their housing's been protected through an eviction moratorium, and that's temporary. And there's a real solution to that. There is the financial support people need so they never have to enter the homeless services system. And while we've done a ton of work to improve that system, nobody ever wants to end up homeless. And that's something we all know and can agree on. So we know how important this resource is to prevent that. It is better for people, and it is better for our community as a whole. And so this is something we can do together to prevent what would otherwise be a real increase in homelessness. So very, very thrilled that the federal government has understood that, and because it would be a national homeless crisis, not just in the District of Columbia, but here in this community, we know that wages have not kept up with the price of rent, and that many, many people are struggling, and we're so grateful that we're able to administer this assistance on your behalf. So look forward to hearing from residents who need that help, and we are here to support you through the process. Thank you.
So it all boils down to the name of the program, Stronger Together Assisting You. And so the reason why Mayor Bowser named the program that, the reason why we're reaching out to you today is because we do believe that by helping you, we're helping our whole city in order for us to really get through this trying time. And so, you know, this resource is a federal resource, $352 million. As you know, Mayor Bowser has fought to make sure that we're not just, that we don't just act like a state, but we're treated like a state with the federal government. And so in that fight, she made sure that this resource was available for our residents. And so there's $352 million on the table. If we apply and we use it, we won't lose it. It'll actually go to make sure that our residents and our families are stabilized through this trying time. And so today, we ask you to go to stay.dc.gov and apply. Start your application. You know, reach out to us if you have questions. We've got the hotline, 1-833-4-STAY-DC, and that will allow you to ask any questions that you have. And we'll even have resources to connect you to some of our great partners, like the Greater Washington Urban League. And so really, right now, the next thing we need folks to do is go to stay.dc.gov and really apply for that rent and utility assistance that's available to you, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get 12 months of past due rent paid, as well as 3 months forward. So we really need folks to do that today. So Stay DC isn't about us, it's about you. It's about making sure that you have what you need to weather this pandemic. The other thing we need folks to do is to pre-register for the free vaccine that's available to DC residents. So we've been putting out information. All DC residents who are 16 and older can now pre-register and now eligible to receive a free COVID-19 vaccine. So go to vaccinate.dc.gov. When you go there, you'll be able to put in all your information. When we have a dose that's available, we'll make sure we send you an invitation so that you can make an appointment for that next week to get the vaccine. And we've got plenty of information on vaccinate.dc.gov for any questions that you have about the vaccine. So 2 things that we're asking. 1, go to apply for rent and utility assistance at stay.dc.gov. And then 2, pre-register for that free COVID-19 vaccine. So with that, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. The questions are great because they help us improve our outreach and our work to get this money invested in our residents and our families. We ask that you continue to mask up and stay safe. Thanks for joining us today.